selected parts from the book One Life is Not Enough, written by Shri K. Nator Singh. Part 14. Manhattan overflowed with the eccentric. It was sophisticated, chic, arty, and elegant. It was outrageous, witty, snobbish, cultivated, earnest, and radiant. On the Fifth Avenue were the best and the classiest restaurants and the finest bookshops. There was Broadway for plays, the Lincoln Theatre for music, Central Park for loitering. In the museums, one could spend a lifetime. The Harlem slums were far away. It was a city of stockbrokers, newspaper barons, lunatics, efficient publishers, bestsellers, and superb hotels. The city's attractions and allures were irresistible. The American dream was flawed but was exciting even its flawed state. The UN created a committee of hospitality which was funded by wealthy American ladies, enabling delegates to travel outside New York. It was a praiseworthy example of American generosity. In the middle of January 1964, I joined one of these all expenses paid flying safaris to California in the company of a dozen delegates from Asia, Africa, Europe, and South America. The flight from New York to San Francisco took over 5 hours, and the time difference was 3.5 hours. It was thus over 13 hours ahead of the clocks of Govind Niwas Bharatpur. New York was below freezing when we left. San Francisco was about 21 degrees Celsius. We were escorted by a young woman, Jane, with an energetic and engaging personality who spoke Ivy League English and French. We became intimate and lifelong friends. Our hotel, the Fairmont in San Francisco, was luxurious and famous. The roller coaster streets gave the city a profile so different from that of Los Angeles. In 1945, the UN was born in San Francisco and Kennedy had won the Democratic nomination here in 1960. I was pleasantly surprised to see the Forster book edited by me on display in several bookshops, which was a balm to the ego. I actually noticed a girl buy a copy and could not resist telling her that I was the editor of the book. She looked skeptical. I turned the book around and there was my photograph with Forster on the back cover. She almost shrieked. Inevitably, she asked me to sign it. From San Francisco, we flew to Los Angeles. Its full name is El Pueblo de Nuestra Señora la Reina de Los Angeles del Rio de Portugal. A most civilized and highly cultured family was my host. Leonard Friedman was teaching at the University of California, Los Angeles. He not only made me comfortable but subjected his family to considerable discomfort in doing so. He gave me his book, Issues of the 60s, which helped me appreciate, comprehend, and understand America from a different and deeper perspective. I had to cut short my tour and return to New York as a Security Council debate on Kashmir was likely. I was thus deprived of seeing Las Vegas. I had been elected rapporteur of the Committee on Decolonization. One of the petitioners, whose presentation was brilliant by any standards, was Lee Kuan Yew of Singapore. In 1962, he appeared before the committee stating that Singapore should remain a part of Malaysia. The following year, he convinced us why Singapore should separate from Malaysia. Only a man of his penetrating brilliance could do so. In decades to come, I got to know him well. We met at Commonwealth summits in New Delhi, Jamaica, Ottawa, Kuala Lumpur, and Singapore. Indira Gandhi did not take to him. He was openly critical of her leftist economic policies and did not hesitate to say so to her face. He, on the other hand, had turned a sleepy colonial third world city into a world class business hub, an unparalleled achievement. That he did so in less than 2 decades is all the more remarkable. But Singapore is a controlled democracy which permits no laxity, indiscipline, democratic chaos, or unbridled media freedom. I often ask myself, would I want to settle down in Singapore? The answer is an emphatic no. For a holiday, yes. I would feel claustrophobic. Its municipal righteousness would get on my nerves, and its treatment of illegal immigrants would outrage me. Kenneth Konda of Zambia also appeared before the committee and broke down, describing the brutal racism of the whites. Blacks were denied entry into shops. I immediately took to him and even gave him a mini tour of Manhattan. Ambassador Sri C.S. Jha paid him no attention. 2 years later, he became Prime Minister of Zambia. Ambassador Jha was at the New York station to receive him along with the ambassador. On spotting Jha, he asked, "Where is Mr. Natwar?" The Australians were active and responsible members of the committee. For a short while, the Australian representative was Sir James Plimsoll, a wise man and an open-minded diplomat. He was succeeded by J.K. McCarthy, who had spent the better part of his working life as a district officer in Papua New Guinea, which was administered by Australia under the trusteeship agreement approved by the UN General Assembly on 13 December 1946. The Australian delegates cooperated with the committee but did not permit petitioners from Papua New Guinea to travel to New York. In July, the Australian government invited the Iranian representative and me to visit Papua New Guinea. In Papua New Guinea, we witnessed a unique panorama of the transformation of a primitive people. They believed in the supernatural and worshipped unknown totems, bow and arrow tribes confronted by modernity and technology. Till the 1930s, most had lived in isolation. Savagery and violence were common. There were no roads or railways and no cattle or horses. The only domesticated animals were pigs brought to the island by the Japanese during World War II. Our hosts took us to the remotest, most densely forested area and to mountainous regions 6 to 8,000 feet above the sea level. One either walked or used aeroplanes. The men with noses pierced with refined bones, bodies smeared with grease, and no footwear. Our single engine plane landed on a strip the size of a football field. At times, it was totally enveloped in thick clouds. I was adventurous, but there were occasions when I felt that our pilot was taking unnecessary risks. If we crashed, it would take weeks to discover the debris. Building even the handkerchief sized tarmacs was a time consuming undertaking. Bricks, machines, steel, and cement were all transported by air. The Australians had done a fantastic job. Their rule was paternalistic, but it had brought education, healthcare, sanitation to a people who, even in 1964, were living in the 10th century. We visited several schools. The children were neatly turned out for our benefit, no doubt, and learning English. In Port Moresby, I saw a poster of Hindi film. The cinema hall was next to the hotel we were staying in, and blaring music kept us awake for the better part of the humid night. The governor of Papua New Guinea invited us for dinner. He and his prickly wife loathed Port Moresby, the capital. They were there on sufferance. My colleague Nabibi asked if he could use the toilet. Madam Governor said that the word should never be used in her house. Nabibi was told to ask if he could go for a walk. We spent a night in Mount Hagen, more than 6,000 feet above the sea level. The administrator was an ex Australian Air Force man, and his wife were the only whites living several hundred miles away from the nearest town. The mail arrived once a week, weather permitting, and there was no doctor for 300 miles. Life threatening accidents and illness were not infrequent, in which case the patient had to be ferried by air in the four-seater plane. I asked the administrator if he did not feel utterly lonely. He said that his job kept him busy throughout the year. He could, at certain hours, contact Port Moresby, but not mainland Australia. After retiring from the Air Force, he had needed a job. After dinner, Nabibi asked if he could go for a walk. The administrator said, "Can I join you?" Nabibi changed his mind. Among the places we visited was the beautiful harbour town of Rabaul. Japan's primary naval and military base in Southwest Pacific during World War II. From Rabaul, we went to Guadalcanal, where Kennedy's boat PT 109 had been cut into two by a Japanese bomb. Kennedy survived. At each place, we had a set drill. The local official introduced us as UN diplomats from India and Iran. In most interior outposts and villages, the people had not heard of either of any of these countries. Our questions were standard. Do you want independence or self determination or to live under the present dispensation? The translation exercise was frustrating. English to Pidgin to the district dialect and finally to the village subdialect. Monumental patience was needed. Our listeners were bewildered. Their answers came in grunts and the translation process was then reversed. The Foreign Service official did not try to interfere or coach the chiefs even once. They were, in any case, more interested in our aeroplane than in the UN or us. Comprehension was beyond the carefree tribals. At times, a feeling of infinite melancholy settled on me. Why had the Almighty given such a raw deal to the inhabitants of this inaccessible and remote island? At the end of 2 weeks, the two of us concluded that Australia was not a colonial power in the traditional sense. It was making serious efforts to prepare Papua New Guinea for self rule. Within a decade, Papua New Guinea joined the UN as a sovereign state. On the return flight from Port Moresby to Sydney, I had a seat next to Tom Mboya, the young Kenyan leader. He was likely to succeed Jomo Kenyatta as the President of Kenya, but he was assassinated in a Nairobi market. Mboya was then 38. His book, The Challenge of Nationhood, has not been forgotten. Thank you for listening.